Hey guys, nice to meet you all. So yeah, look, let me quickly share my screen and let us get started. So my name's Owen McGuinness. As you can tell by my surname, I'm Irish. So I manage the HubSpot for Startups for all of Central and Eastern Europe. So if you guys have any questions after this session, by all means, feel free to connect with me. So before we get started, I suppose I wanted to kind of set the expectations in the right way for you all today. So as I said, look, it will be a little bit interactive. I'm not going to get you to speak, but if you would like to maybe chat in using the chat, by all means, please do. To give you a bit of an idea of today's agenda, right? So first, one of the key things that I find when we look at a topic like creating an effective startup sales team, we actually have to take a step back and really look at the current state, which I'll get onto in a second. From there, it's really then I've sort of mapped it out to the different stages to go into that. So looking at the sales process, how to improve what you already have, looking at the sales frameworks itself to see how we can build on that. And then from there, how can we accelerate the sales process from start to finish? But how can we do that efficiently, right? And how can we hire the right people? How do we look at finding the right people? And then at the very end, then, as I said, we'll maybe go through a few scenarios with that. And then at the very end, I'm just going to have a bit of a Q&A session. So you won't want to hear my Irish accent for the next full hour. So if you do have any questions, do feel free to interrupt me. As I said, I love having a bit of an open dialogue on these sessions, right? So let's get straight into it. So one of the big factors that you find through the buying journey at the minute is buyers have all the control, right? And what I mean by that is most buyers, regardless of whether you're B2B or B2C, the buyer themselves will be able to do a huge amount of research before they ever speak to a salesperson in your organization or wherever they look at your sales process in general. So what we need to do is really need to look at the blockers that we have set ourselves for the customer. And then how can we essentially break those areas of friction to be able to build the sales process in the right way. And if you look at it, the expectations that are there from a buyer are very, very straightforward, right? So let me take an example. So this is Timmy. Timmy is a typical average B2B buyer, right? He's somewhere in the region of 35 and 44. He's got a master's degree, he uses Facebook and LinkedIn all the time. He prefers to be communicated through social or text message. His job responsibilities is essentially removing friction from his employees. He's a CTO, or he reports to the CTO. And as you can see, I've built a fairly robust idea of what Timmy wants. But when we look at the sales process, right, typically, this is what Timmy would experience when he deals with a startup. Right? They'll go to a conference, you might meet them, they get a sales process, you have a one-to-one meeting, they purchase, right? They become a happy customer, right? Which is great. And this is maybe the way it was in the 90s. But when we look at that linear sales or buyer journey, right, we've got it broken up into awareness, consideration, and decision-making stages. But it's massively sales driven, right? And if you look now, the way the customer journey works in 2022, Timmy scrolls on LinkedIn, he finds a post, he goes to a blog page, he clicks on a call to action, he discusses that with his team the next day, he goes on to Google, he researches you, he downloads an ebook on the particular topic. And what it ends up looking like is his full journey looks a little bit more like this, where, you know, as I said, as I've just described, he's gone through these different motions. And you can see here that sales only comes into it really halfway through. And we can see then that he goes through another flow and then he gets to the stage of purchase. Now, this is the way the buyer journey looks in 2022, right? It's very different to typically the way it used to be. So when we look at that journey then, today it's not just about what you sell, it's about how you sell it and how you go to market, right? Because that's so important, the way you actually go to market. We have to nearly pretend that people don't want our products, right? But how can we tell them about how good our product is without using the word I, right? Because that's one of the major problems that we have. So we need to think about that selling motion, and does it match the way the buyer wants to buy? And is the way we engage with the buyer the way that they would prefer to engage, right? So when you look at it and go back to the typical sales process, it was marketing got you in a funnel, then you moved down into the sales team, you lost some people, and then they came out and became a lead. The way things are now, it's very different. The center of the world is the customer, where I have written the word CRM, right? And everything that's attached around it is this concept of a flywheel. And the idea that the more we know about the customer, the easier it is for us to sell to them in the long run. And the more we can keep retention rates, keep them happy, keep them coming back to us over and over again, right? So when we look at that, we need to really look at the buyer, the value proposition for the customer, right? So before you start selling, you really want to nail this down. So I've taken a couple of really good examples of this, right? So let's say Slack. So imagine what you've accomplished together. Snappy, quick, to the point, right? And it's giving, again, going back from a sales process, this is giving the customers what they want, but quickly, right? So we're giving them that information quickly. Another quick example here, build, engage, retarget your audience with web push notifications. Quick, snappy, we know what they want. And again, here's another good example as well. So I'll share this slide deck with you and you can kind of have a look at those later on. But really then when we have that information, right? So we've looked at the current process. Now it's really about creating that sales process. So, and again, I haven't even gone into the main topic of this talk so far, because I really want to frame what ways need to think about this, whether it's the first hire, whether it's the 20th hire in sales. We need to have this really rock solid when we get that stage to really see that startup growth and that scale up growth. So let's look at these two things first off, right? So sales process, as you can imagine, this is the steps that it takes to get a customer. But we also need to think of the sales methodology. So what way do we think about how we sell? Some good examples of that are like Sandler's, methodology. There's Challenger sales process. There's a couple of other examples, and I'll link them to you afterwards as well, so you can have a look at them. But why we need to think about the process and the methodology is the two of them really need to work hand in hand together. So when we look at that sales process, like I think anyone that's in the room right now, I can safely say that we've either have sold in the past, or we have our team that sells, or so on and so forth, right? But I really wanted to, again, take a bit of a background step here, and I wanted to think about the 6 stages to go into it, right? So the first one, prospecting, so finding a lead, getting them then to move across to the second stage, which is connecting and qualifying early. So as I describe, winning quick or losing quick. So is someone a good fit for our business? Not everyone's a good fit for our business, and we need to realize that, and we need to be able to qualify that in the right way. Research and discovery. So again, asking the right questions that's in relation to, who they are, what type of customer are they, what decision-making stage do they have, what their goals of their business is, and really getting the fundamentals of everything they're looking at. If we move on then to the next stage, then from there it's presenting. So again, whether it's a demo, whether it's sharing a product, now again, this could be a little bit more focused on the B2B world, but are we giving a presentation? Is there something that we're trying to get at the end of it? handling objections number 5, so making sure that we're kind of hitting all the right things, and then at the very end is closing, right? And a lot of people, when they hire a salesperson, they focus on this stage the most. Have they closed? Have they got good closing experience? Do they know what they're doing? And so on and so forth. But without the methodology and without the actual process, we never really get to this point effectively. And without having all of that earlier work done and figuring out where the friction points in our sales process are, we never really get to this point. So what I'm going to suggest to everyone that's on the call is have a think about your buyer's journey after this session today. And I've taken this very quick example that you can use, but look at a potential goal that you have. So in my case, in the exception that I've used here, is I want to increase my win rate by 5% at the end of the quarter. And what I've done is I've added in the sales activities, right? So again, these are going to vary depending on what you guys do as well. So have a think about it from your own sort of processes, and then map that to the buyer's activity. So almost get in the shoes of your buyer. You know, what do they want? What have they done in the past? What are they interested in? You know, when they get to this research or presenting stage, do they jump off a cliff and disappear and never speak to you again? Or do they actually continue on? Sorry, excuse me. Excuse me. Do they continue on the process, and do they get to the stage where you close them? And if so, great. What can we learn about how that transition went? If they don't, why? Why are they not getting there? Is there something that's wrong in the journey currently? Is there something that we can look at and we can change and adapt? So if anyone has 10 or 15 minutes after this or later on today, I would highly suggest that you spend a bit of time and get into your buyer's shoes and really have a think about that journey, because mapping this is going to be so important to the type of people you hire. Because you need to be clever in terms of mapping that process to the methodology to what the buyer wants, to make sure that you're hiring the right person, not just someone that has done 150% of their quota for the last 5 years. We need to think about the type of person we hire and the type of sales team we hire, based on the methodology that we're trying to do to get to that expansion point. And all of that comes from understanding the buyer better. Now, building the trust through the journey is, in my opinion, the most important thing about selling. Is how do we attract the right type of people? How do we convert them, and how do we close them? So I've taken, again, a couple of examples of this where we look at, you know, if we look at the attract stage, how can we tweak our offering slightly to fit into that buyer a little bit better? How can we add personalization at scale to be able to really drive the right types of people into our journey? And then the same thing with conversions, right? When we look at the conversion points, are we getting people through? Are they staying with us? Are they interested in our content and our general value proposition? And are they looking at our customer stories or research and so on and so forth? And then the very last stage, and as I said, the part that people fixate about in sales is the close. But you know, are we getting the right activities? Is there cold? Like, what is the difference between our calling? Do we do a lot of cold? Do we do warmer ones? Are we tracking things? How is the personalization to that? So again, we want to keep that trust. We want to build that trust, and we want to stay. And you'll notice I keep using the word personalization a couple of different points here. It's how can we give that personal feel to a customer? Again, regardless of what industry you are, the more personalized that experience is, even at scale, the better it is for long-term growth. Cool. So again, the secret sauce here is a very simple process, in my opinion, called GPCT, which is goals, plans, challenges, and timelines. It's a very, very simple framework for your essentially sales processes. So one, if we look at goals, it's what are your goals? What are your priorities? What are you responsible for? And digging deeper into that information. And having this is a very clear framework for any new salesperson or anyone that's in sales. They need to follow this. And again, that goes back to what I was sharing at the very start of the presentation, right? Because if we understand the buyer, we will be very easily be able to implement GPCT so that we can then track that frictionless sales process, which I'll get onto in a second. When we look at plans, you know, what are they planning to do? What are they looking at? What did they do last year? Really look at future and past tense, because if we get an idea of the past tense, it'll obviously help us better understand where they're getting to. Same thing then with challenges. So when we look at the challenges, oh, sorry, just got a question in there. So can I talk more on how the personalize your communication with the customer? Yeah, absolutely. So let me maybe flick back to one page there again. So from a personalization standpoint, it's really just, again, making sure that you're following the right steps in terms of using the likes of video through that process. So when someone is going through the, let's say, attract stage, you know, it could be you're sending someone a LinkedIn message and making sure that it's personalized to communication to the way that they want to. So for instance, LinkedIn is a great way to do it. In email, you might send a video to someone being like, hey, I'm Owen McGuinness here from HubSpot. I'd love to chat to you about X, Y, and Z, and keeping things short and snappy. That's a lot better than getting a cold call while you're having your lunch or getting an email out of the blue. So keeping those communication touch points, and that can work for any part of the journey. Or again, just thinking outside the box slightly and not just kind of doing what everyone else does, which is potentially cold calling and cold emailing. If we can add a little bit more personalization, whether it's just a couple of phrases in an email that's different than the way everyone else does it, or using video to basically show your face or have your communication touch points, that works really, really well. I know when I was a sales rep and when I was a sales manager, we had engagement rates of anywhere up to 70% on cold email using video, because it was personalized. It was a human is sending you a video of them talking about your business, talking to you in a one-to-one setting, and it worked really well. And we did the same thing then with handovers from sales to service. So, hey, this is Owen and this is my colleague Jane Doe. We like blah, 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 blah. And you're explaining that, you know, this is a two-way street. So using personalization in that way would work really, really well. Great question though. I'll share some other tips after this as well. So you can have a good read through them. Going back to the GPCT, so looking again at the challenges. So again, what is your challenges? What hurdles are you affecting? How are you finding it to hit your goals? Asking tough questions and having that pre-built into your processes will make life easier. You don't want to have what's described as happy ears, which is where you just take everything in, everything's great, and you don't ask hard questions. So challenges is really where you ask really hard questions, but obviously in a nice way to figure out, again, if this person is a right fit for your business. As I always say to people that I might consult with or mentor for, you know, our time is valuable. As you know, founders or as salespeople, our time is so valuable. So when we are giving our time away, whether it's someone that comes into us cold or whether it's a net new lead that comes in from our website, ask hard questions, because your time is just as valuable to the person across the Zoom from you or across the desk from you. So if we ask good questions, we challenge each other, you'll find that you'll get to that solution an awful lot quicker. Fourth one, it seems really simple, but timelines. What are your challenges? How quickly are you getting there? When are you looking to get started? Why are you looking to do this? I had a very interesting VP of sales in HubSpot many years ago, and he described that a salesperson's job was not closing business, it was closing next steps. And it was something that I always say to people on these type of workshops. A salesperson's job is closing next steps. So it's moving someone to the next stage of that journey to get to that close down the road. And again, that works regardless of what industry you're in. It's really about making sure that you continually add value with the customer or the prospective customer rather than asking them to buy straight away. Okay, so we need to look at that a little bit more. So adding value using consultative selling, right? So again, this goes back to the real essence of what we're trying to achieve. You know, if we have a very transactional business, we obviously need to hire more focused transactional salespeople. If we've got a complex business model that has a longer deal cycle, we need to hire very good consultative salespeople. So people that are essentially there to build this collaborative vision for a customer. So using things like we, us, are, together, over time, I, me, you, you know, looking at the way that we build that relationship. And, you know, instead of being a salesperson, we have to build that into someone that's a partner, a trusted partner, an advisor, someone that they can go to for help, even if it's not typically about your product or service. You know, that's what shows a really interesting or a really good salesperson, or being generally interested in the business, right? Everyone loves to hear their own voice. Everyone loves to hear about their business. So asking a good salesperson will always dig really deeply into that business, learn all about it, and not just be bored or just sitting there. Yeah, cool. Tell me about it. Yawning, looking around, not paying attention. There's nothing more frustrating than that. So we need to make sure that when we are looking at the people that we hire or building that process, that we have really either entrepreneurial people that are really interested in business, but also really interested in learning. If you can learn more, the likelihood is that your success rate will jump up. And then this seems really simple, but how does your product or service, help that person reach their personal goals? Like, is your product going to help them get promoted? Is it going to make them VP? Are they going to become CTO? You know, is there something personally that they can get invested in to help you help them? And again, it seems quite simplistic, but it does make a big help. And then help them sell in internally. So again, in a consultative sales process, we need to think about, you know, how can we make this a team effort? And that goes back to using these collaborative words. Cool, I see a chat just popped in. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, so I mentioned about being authentic, and sometimes this happens in companies give personalities tests with no right or wrong answers and then reject people. Yeah, good question. Again, I think, and again, I may be just thinking about this from personally here, but when you look at, you know, personality tests, sometimes it can be more about the type of person that you are. So, you know, we don't want to have someone that looks good on the surface but is a bit of a narcissist in the background sort of working for us if they're not maybe a fit for the company culture. You know, I think that's a lot of the time where the personality tests come in. You're right, there is no wrong and right answer, but it's just, I suppose, with those type of people, it's just about making sure that they are a cultural fit and that they fit into the whole, I suppose, sales methodology. If I put my sales hat on for a second, will they be able to sell the way we want to sell going forward? But great question. Anyone have any other questions for me while I've taken a second? Okay, I'll take silence as a good thing. If anyone does have any questions, do feel free to hit to message them in the chat. As I said, look, I love answering on the spot questions. I think they're always really helpful. So look, let's move on to 3 elements of the good sales process, right? And I think I've alluded to a lot of these as we've gone through, but the first is deal stages. What are factual and what is inspectable, right? Inspectable is an interesting one for any of the founders on the room. What I really mean is, can we have data points on it? Like, can we actually see when a deal process is moving from one stage to another? Are we getting closer to that sell, and where are the friction points that are going in that? Second one is matching the way the buyer likes to purchase. So that is what I've spent the first 15 minutes of this session talking about, is, are the buyers comfortable with this sales process? And does it make sense for them? More importantly, does it make sense? And then the last one is educate, don't sell. Consultative sales process. Again, regardless of what industry you are, no one likes being sold to. So educate, share more. If any of you follow Gary V, or Gary Vaynerchuk, it's really give, and then get in return at the very end. So if we can give more than we get, it always will work in our favor in the long term, right? So how can we improve your current sales process, right? So again, this is one of our more important factors here, is now that we understand the current sales process that you guys have, how can we implement a frictionless selling process, right? So again, how can we implement this in the right way so that we hire the right people, so that we essentially get the likelihood for closes faster? And then this is, again, long term, what we'll see that success to look like. Let me just take a second. Someone just popped me into the chat. Thank you, Christopher. Please excuse me if I pronounced your name incorrectly. So just in case no one had seen it on the chat, it just said, yeah, you might come to it, but do you have any particular tips or thought processes around recruiting a team to a startup without having much results to show for in the startup, not in general? Great presentation so far. Thank you. Okay. So I'll actually get to that as we get to the end of this, Christopher, and I'll share a couple of tricks and tips along the way, if that's cool. So you can keep me accountable if I'm not coming to it by the end. You can message me back in again. Cool. So yeah, improving your sales process. So one is, as I mentioned, analyze the current process. So we've spent a good bit of time on that so far. 2, map out your customer journey. So again, we've spent a bit of time on this as well. But for anyone that's like newish startup, this is really important at the beginning, because don't make assumptions and then stick with it. Make assumption and change, adapt. Follow the lean startup principles, change, adapt, move on. You'll be surprised what you'll learn. You'll have a feeling that something will work, and then we need to then take that feeling and move it to data, and then move what is happening. For anyone that has been in business and have been selling for a while, don't have blinkers on. Really think about the journey and change it and look at it and try and figure out ways that will make it a little bit better. The third one is define the exit criteria for each stage, right? So when we go back to that first slide that I showed you, is around, there's a cold call, then we've got the next one, which is discovery, then we've got the next one, which is show value, and so on and so forth through the sales process. Make sure that there's very, very clear understanding of the criteria to leave from one stage to another. So what information and commitment is needed before a prospect can move to the next part of the sales process? And when I used the expression earlier on, happy ears, we shouldn't just take what a customer is saying as gospel, right? We need to say, okay, cool, that person, We need to hold them accountable, follow that GDP or GCPT process, and make sure that we're getting the information that we need to based on those different stages that we go around. Okay, so that's going to be really, really important. Then from there, number 4 is measure the results. So again, we need to do this at every stage, but we also need to say, okay, on each one of those stages, what are the things that we're looking for? So demo conversions, deal to close rates, average time to close, certain information that will help us get there and get there really, really straightforward in the shortest time frame to get there. Cool. I just got one other question here, which I'm just going to quickly tackle over here. So we have some people on our team that have decades of experience, and as we are a relatively small startup, are often involved in certain stages of a sales process, especially from a prospective customers, that result in a major chunk of our revenue. There are times when I feel as if there is a conflict in being confident using their years of experience, essentially showing that you understand what the customer needs are versus being a more personable individual who as someone who wants to reach conclusions, and so come across as someone who wants to work at reaching these consultatives together. To the latter would be more appealing if I was to put myself in the customer's shoes, regardless of whoever I'm talking to and their experience. Just wanted to hear your general thoughts on the above. Great question, and that's actually one I get a lot. So part of it is you 100% have to lean on experience, right? And people will have tips and tricks and stuff that will work, and that will have worked all the time and would have worked for decades. And you're right, in terms of most customers or most businesses, especially in startups, 80% of their revenue essentially comes from 20% of their customers, majority of the time. And my thoughts on what you're saying there is you're completely right. With those bigger customers, the ones that are making up a good chunk of your revenue, definitely be more consultative with them, absolutely. But we do want to keep them as happy as we can, especially at the beginning. What we do want to do, though, is going forward is looking at those net new customers, right? So those new potential customers that we have, building in the framework to work to basically get more of the customers that cause less headaches, if I say that in a political way. How can we get more of the right types of customers and less of the ones that take up all of our time? So yeah, I completely get what you mean. Like, the conflict that can sometimes happen there is a little bit harder. But when you look at for net new, or looking at going, growing the business more from a sales process, I would absolutely, we should be challenging, we should be asking questions, we should definitely be more consultative. But I completely get what you mean from that consultative standpoint. Does that answer your question, or is there anything else I can add to that? Perfect. If you've any other questions on that point, and you want to have just an offline chat, the guys from Vestbee will pass on my details afterwards. Just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to spend a bit of time one-to-one. I'm always happy to help. Cool. Love the chats, love the questions. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Yeah. So look, let's jump on then to the next part, is implementing this frictionless sales frame, right? Because it's easy to talk about it. It all probably makes sense to a lot of you, but then it's really a case of, yeah, Owen, that's great, but like, how am I actually going to put that into play, right? So I would definitely maybe give you some ideas from this, right, and how to implement. So again, like with everything, we've got sort of 3 phases of it. So the first one is enable, alignment, and then the transform. So first part is enable. So your team, how can you get your team to spend more time selling, right? So reducing the amount of time that it takes them. How can we move people through that process as easy as possible, right? So again, moving on with that, if you look at the traditional sales process, right, you know, so this can actually probably go to that question a little bit more, is we go blind a little bit with blind outreach traditionally. We don't have a connected process from all of our different departments. So that's what I mean by siloed work. We use multiple tools for data entry. There's no real prioritization. There might be a little bit, but we're even using Excel or we're using some other system and we're just pulling in things. And then again, there's a number of leads, right? So there could be a multitude of different leads. When we look at the frictionless sales process, we kind of flip that on its head a little bit. So informed outreach, that's personalized. So if I'm sending an email to, or if I'm reaching out to any of one of you on the call, I'm going to spend 3 or 4 minutes, probably no more than 3 or 4 minutes, doing a little bit of research on what companies have you worked with before, what type of startup is it, and I'll send you a very quick video that will be extremely personalized to you guys, right? Team collaboration. Very simple. Sales can't just be the people that are selling. It has to come from every individual person, whether it's customer support, whether it's marketing. You know, we need to have a team unified approach. If there's not a unified approach, we might as well shoot ourselves in the foot. It's never going to get us to where we want to be. One system with data entry. So again, having one unified place that has all the information, or one source of truth, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's very clear and the expectations are there for everyone. Again, very simple, systematic prioritization. Sounds fancier than it is. Really what I mean by that is, you know, do we have clear expectations of priorities? So if we're targeting particular types of companies, are we targeting particular subsets of people? You know, what are we doing? Clear expectations. And then quality of leads. Quality over quantity always wins. So we want to have the right people. We don't want everyone, right? You know, and I say this to people all the time, you know, who is HubSpot a good fit for as a piece of software? And I always say not everyone is my answer, because it's not a fit for some types of companies. It's not a fit for some size of companies. So it's really, again, just being true to yourselves. You're not going to be a perfect fit for everyone, but there is going to be cohorts of people that are perfect for. So enable your reps with clear information. If we can give them clear information, the likelihood for the sales process becomes an awful lot clearer, okay? Now, to enable this for your reps, again, give them clear processes, give them clear tools, and then adapt, listen to them, change things, update things based on what they say and what the customer says and what customer facing people say. Take a look at your sales team's day is always an interesting thing. If they're spending more time than 30%, if they're spending, actually, if I'm being honest, if they spend more than 20% of their time doing admin, there's some serious problems there, right? The reduction of admin is going to mean that they spend more time selling. Find places to automate it. Again, it sounds really simple, but you don't have to hire 1 million salespeople. You can have a small cohort of salespeople that are really good at what they do, because a lot of their back end, or as I describe it, boring work, is taken away from them. So automate what we can, that will make life easier. And then look at key metrics. So how long does it take to do key time tasks? How long are they spending talking to customers? And then more importantly, how is that quota attainment being done? If they spend more time buried in a CRM and less time speaking to your customers, we've got problems, right? So we need to look at those key enablement tools. The alignment piece. So again, very important. You know, ruthlessly prioritizing your customers' needs, right? So what do they want to? So traditionally, sales is 9 to 5. They send 7 emails to schedule each meeting. If there's a hostile negotiation where there's 2 people butted against each other trying to outdo the other person, heavily upfronted contracts and commitments, and then there's a very rigorous sales process or rigid sales process. So they have to essentially tick a load of boxes, right? We don't want that. We want that frictionless sales process. So on demand, when it happens, it happens. You know, do they buy online? Can they buy touchlessly? What are the processes that can take? Making sure that the meetings themselves are very simple. So the experience is very straightforward and very easy to do. Transparency in terms of pricing and discounting, again, being just clear and upfront, easy to buy, easy to cancel, and again, buyer-driven processes. So again, making sure that it's what the customers want, and making sure that that process is really, really easy, right? So the important thing is to take ownership over the customer experience, make it a priority, and make it a priority across the whole business and be consistent, right? You can make these changes now, and then in 6 months' time, you get bored of them, or you know, you've got a lot of customers coming in, your MRR has increased, your ARR has increased, or you know, your lifetime value of a customer has increased, and you're happy. But you need to make that a priority from the get-go, and from, you know, essentially the whole time that customer is there, but also for any new customers who come in, because customer experience is the most important thing. So some key metrics to align on here: close rates, time to close, and customer satisfaction. Whatever way you do it, whether it's net promoter score, whether it's reviews, whether it's customer effort score, whatever it is, get feedback. It's so important to get that feedback, and then on it from a business standpoint, you'll be able to track these based on the information that we have from closes, right? So again, making sure the alignment is very, very clear. The last stage is that transformation stage. So your team, your culture, and your learning, right? So again, going back to the traditional inconsistent performance, things are just consistently up and down. People spend most of their time buried in an Excel or in a spreadsheet. Managers priority mainly for focus on reporting. That's an absolute nightmare. No help for struggling reps. Sell them or forget them. So again, that concept of, I think it's from some movie, it's ABC, always be closing. I can't think of the name of the movie off the top of my head, but that whole concept is essentially dead, right? We really need to help people. We need to help them, give them more, and get them to that consistent stage. And what that means when we look at the frictionless sales process then is that we've got consistent performance, we've got real-time data because we're not using spreadsheets as much, and then managers are more trainers and less box ticking robots, right? We need to be coaches, we need to train, we need to help, give them playbooks, training, and sales accountability as well from a customer success standpoint. So the more we can make people feel part of the team, not a case of, you know, you come in, you need to start selling ASAP or you're going to get fired. What we really need to do is, you know, if we can build on those first 2 stages I showed you, and then build up that trust with the salespeople, because we trust that we hired the right person, because we have moved to this maybe consultative sales process, and we can give them the right resources, it'll make it really easy. So to transform your current team and to look at the new hires, right, we need to find out the ways that your sales team, you know, see and access data. So what are they looking at? How are they improving? Where are they looking at their current I suppose, processes, and how is that working? Have a team of experts, right? And again, that sounds really simple, but what I mean by that is, who are the people that are on your team that are really good at demoing? Who are the people that are really good at closing? Who are the people that are really good at prospecting? And use those people to help train everyone else, because they are the people that know the sales process inside out. So using the people that you already have means that you probably already have an army of experts in there in the right place. work on the enablement of coaching as an operating into your operating system. So enable coaching, and again, it sounds so simplistic, but I think people sometimes forget during the sales process that like salespeople do need to be coached along the way, whether they need to have someone that just puts an arm around them, or whether it's a mentor that's there for them. Having that built into your whole operation system will make it easier. And again, how do you account for this? Some key metrics. Customer retention is always a great metric for it. Rep productivity and employee happiness. So it seems really simple, but will make a massive difference to that frictionless sales process that I was talking about, right? So how can you learn to create a process? I'll share with you in a couple of minutes time. But one of the other kind of key things that I'd say, and I did promise this earlier on about giving some tips around hiring, recruiting people for the sales team. So very, very simple tricks with that is look at your ideal salesperson, right? That you might currently have, or look at it based on your current sales process. It doesn't always have to be the top performing salesperson. Sometimes they can be a bit of a lone wolf, and you sometimes need a bit of a lone wolf. But it's usually someone that's really consistent, that hits their quota all the time, that help people, that are really good at coaching. And then look at that type of person. And again, I know this sounds really simplistic, but look at that type of person and try and hire more of those. So what are the characteristics that they enable, that you can use and add into your recruitment process? Usually the best way to figure out the right types of people to hire are usually sitting in the office with you, or on Zoom, or are already employed with you. That you can basically just figure out what makes them tick, what are the things that we should be looking out on that would be similar to them, and add that to your recruiting process, right? And again, I know that sounds so simplistic, but it really will make a big help, because when you are looking at that sales process, it is the type of people that exceed expectations in terms of not just sales performance, but also in terms of cultural fit. So will they be a fit for your sales process, your sales methodology? Will we be able to get more of them? And then looking at where within the different areas or different places do they live. So if I very crudely go back to my very first slide, and let me just jump back out of this. Sometimes what we need to do is we actually need to look at doing a buyer persona, but for a hire persona. So who is that type of person that we're looking for? Where do they live? Where do they look at? What are they doing? And we can take that information based on, as I said, that current employees that you have that fit that mold, or it could be similar companies or similar people that you'd like to build that on from. So hopefully that answers your question, Christopher. Please excuse me there for my pronunciation is absolutely terrible today. So the last three. So the last bit then from here is really let me just reshare this again. But very last thing to do, and I've already sort of challenged you to look at your buyer persona right now. But look, one of the things that I've sort of said to some of this from a practice exercise, HubSpot does have a free CRM. So if you're looking to maybe design or look at designing your sales process, there's a very good lesson here. That's just a video that is a couple of videos or action points that you can do to have a look at it. As I said, it'll be quite helpful. And then from the very end here, as I said, look, one of the other things just to kind of help you understand a little bit more, we do have office hours every Wednesday at 10 a.m. So that will be for anyone that's on, that's Dublin time. So it'll probably be an hour or 2 hours ahead for you guys. So it'll be 11 a.m. But you can register here. There's also a knowledge base that has a set number of like product related questions. And if anyone wants to sign up and try the free CRM or are interested in learning more about HubSpot, there's a unique code here for Vestbee. So all you need to do is just click on this one here. That would automatically enable you guys to use the free tools. And if you're ever looking at buying HubSpot in the future, you will get a reduction at either a 50% discounted rate, or if you have gone through any seed funding rounds, you will be able to get a 90% off HubSpot. So just as a very quick FYI. Perfect. I see there's one quick question that just came in there, so I'm just going to run through that one and then I'll open it up to everyone else on the floor. So there are certain campaigns where I've noticed that there are too many steps in our sales process, resulting in leads essentially ghosting us at certain stages. A whole host of possibilities as to why they're doing this. There's always the option to get more information out of every interaction. For example, embedding a form in an email outreach that allows us to get vital information so time isn't wasted on initial calls. How important is it to balance the amount of calls / times you spend actually conversing with a lead, building rapport, relationships first, the sales process to be efficient, ideally reducing challenges of the leads going dry? Brilliant question. So when it comes to, so I'll maybe start with the forms. For me, reduced questions increases the likelihood for someone to continually convert. What I mean by that is every question after the second question on a form has a drop-off rate of 50%. So the less you ask, the more you can ask, the more they do things. So for instance, I'll give you a real world example. So I fill in a form on the website that says 10 tips for a better sales process. I give you my first name and my email address. I come back to the website based on an email that was sent to me that tells me that I get €500 free on Google Ads. I click on that one. I then give you 2 new questions. So you already know my first name and my email address. So what's my job title and what's my biggest challenge? So my biggest challenge is we're struggling to sell. We have a really low close rate. So what I'm doing there is by someone filling in a form twice, I've got a good bit of information from them. So you're bang on the money. Like, ask questions, absolutely, but just don't ask too many. In terms of building time and building rapport, again, it depends on your sales process. If we have a very consultative sales process, ask more questions, like absolutely, and get people on the phone and get them to speak to the salesperson if that's the right fit for your buyer type. For instance, like CTOs hate being on the phone, so ask them questions through forums. CMOs or chief marketing officers or founders love talking about themselves and love being on the phone. So ask them, get them to do that. So what I'm trying to get at here is it really depends on the type of your buyer persona. If your buyer persona is someone that is a good fit for talking in meetings and loves chatting to people and building up relationships, absolutely get them on the phone. If it's a CTO, don't ask them questions through a form. You can really tailor that approach whatever way makes sense. But you're right, reducing the chances of them going dry is really important. So we don't want that lead to dry up, but we don't want to give them too much all the time and bore them and delete them. I'll give you an example for myself. I bought a new helmet for my road bike, and the company sent me 6 emails in 2 days. I unsubscribed from them, even though I spent quite a lot of money with them the last few months. I unsubscribed from them because they didn't understand my customer journey at all. They tried to bombard me with too much. whereas they should have made it a little bit simpler of a process. So as I said, look, make it really, really simple, and it'll make life a hell of a lot easier. Christoph, to repeat my last question, could you please quickly go to the slide with the last 3 tips of your 6 you introduced? Yes, I can. Was it this one, Christoph? Christopher, I think it was. Oh, the last 3 tips. Sorry. Yeah. Is it the metrics or the tips itself? I can say I'm going to send you this slide anyway, so you can go through them. But if you do have any other questions, do let me know. Anyone else have any other questions for me? I know we're just about on time, which is a rare occurrence for me. No,
I didn't see any other questions.
Good. Take silence as a positive thing. But look, as I said, I'm more than happy to share with you my calendar. If anyone does want to book a little bit of time with me individually to ask me any questions or pick my brain on any particular topic types, the guys from Vestbee will share the slide deck, and they'll also share my calendar. Share my email address, and by all means feel free to connect with me. I love learning about businesses. I love learning about startups, so if there's anything I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do so.